I'd say roughly when I became 40 is when I'll say I had like the awakening. And that was, 4 years ago at this point. And so it just became like something that I became more aware of. And I was able to call out, I was able to look at myself honestly and say, you're acting like a little baby right now. And not like you're a punk, but more just like you really could have handled that differently. And you allowed yourself to get to a place that you don't want to be in. So that was kind of how it started. And then I started to pick at those mistakes I kept making and started to rectify some of them that I knew were really affecting my family life. At the time, I noticed that there was a huge influence from the job that I held, the company that I worked for. The pressures of that job very easily translated into chaos in my house. And I was able to understand that really quickly, and I quit the job. I didn't have a backup plan. I just said, this is not worth I'm not sacrificing my life because of my own like stress levels and that, but my family life is not worth this job. So I hung it up.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Manny Digital, welcome, man. I know we have booked this way in advance. I've been looking forward to getting you on the show. Finally, schedules have aligned, and here we are. Welcome, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. Great to meet all of you guys.
Dude, I'm pumped, because we got very different backgrounds, of course, but we connected really well when we did our kind of pre-meeting and everything like that, and I'm really thrilled to get your story out here and just have a great conversation with you. So with that, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about who you are. Tell us about your family, a little bit about your background, and we'll go from there, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm a kid from the Bronx, and I just happened to be wearing a T-shirt that says the Bronx. It was not planned.
Little on the nose.
I was out in the backyard with my kids, just throwing the wiffle ball around, and I was like, "Oh snap! All right, this is perfect. So let's just rock with it." But I was born and bred in the Bronx here in New York. Currently still living in the state, a little bit outside of the hustle and bustle of the city these days. I've got 3 children, ages 17, 11, and 8, girl, boy, girl. Married to my wife for 12 years now, and grew up, to a family, immigrant family. My parents are originally from the Dominican Republic and had what amounted to be a fairly trouble-free, upbringing in the concrete jungle that is New York City. But I was able to steer clear of a lot of the stereotypical stuff you might hear about places like where I came from. Just really because I had my eye on trying to get out, really and truly. That's what it kind of was, the motivator. And you probably hear this story many times. A lot of times it comes through the basketball route. You'll hear like NBA players coming from similar backgrounds. My story is kind of different and relatively funny in the sense that my goal, or my not my goal, but my motivator was a show by the name of Saved by the Bell. Have you heard of this show? Okay.
Oh yeah.
And now you're gonna probably say, what the hell does a California cool kid like Zach Morris have anything to do with a kid from the Bronx like Manny? Absolutely nothing, other than Zach went to a high school that had lockers in it. And that was really the first time I actually saw lockers in a school. And I was like, that is the coolest thing I've seen. I don't know what it was about having lockers in a school that I was so drawn to, but it became a motivator. So I knew once I was going to high school, I needed to go to a high school that had lockers that I could actually use. Many of the schools around me did not, or they had them, but you couldn't really use them, or they became like breeding grounds for people to get beat up if they stopped in the middle of class or something like that. So ended up going to a parochial school that had lockers, and I thoroughly enjoyed having to switch books after every period and all that kind of stuff. And then they went off to college, and I was like, I kind of want to do that college thing. And one thing leads to another, and I built a pretty successful career. Now I consider myself a dadtrepreneur. Um, and yeah, man, been living a fairy tale, I feel like, for quite a bit now.
Yeah,
So
and one of those companies you runs is right, your apparel company. You want to tell us a little bit about that real quick?
Yeah, so one of my business partners, she and I have been working together for a long time in a different industry, and we off the back of my podcast that I do with a couple of my friends, she was inspired by that podcast and said, you guys do a good job serving dads this way. Have you thought about serving dads another way? And I was like, what do you mean? So she was basically introduced me to the e-commerce space, and a company called Fly Dad was born. And so Fly Dad's sole purpose is to help dads elevate their confidence by providing them with, in our case right now, we've got a singular product, which is a men's baby bag, backpack baby bag, but really just making a father feel as comfortable as possible in one of the most uh, confusing, very quickly changing moments of their lives, which is when they enter into fatherhood.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey for sure. And
Journey, man.
most baby bags are very feminine looking, very so that's cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Brandon, did you have something you
oh
wanted to
yeah,
add?
I wanted to ask with the Saved by the Bell because I grew up on that show as well. Which one of your friends was Screech and which one was Slater?
I
You
think
know.
I was probably Screech. I was probably Screech. My buddy was my buddy that went into the military. He was definitely Slater.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Uh,
definitely a Screech myself. So
yeah, I was definitely
Yeah.
screeching out there. I
that's
pretended to be
hilarious.
Zach, but I was definitely Screech.
I
That's
don't
so
know
great.
whether I think I was probably Zach more so than anything because I was a loud mouth. I wouldn't shut up.
So
Nothing's changed.
shifting
Yeah.
back, Fly Dad's obviously established in 2020. You created podcast Fatherhoods. Can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. And that also was kind of brought up by just life, right? So there's three of us in the podcast. DJ EFN, which some folks might know from the Drink Champs podcast, which is like this humongous hip hop podcast that's out there right now. And our buddy K. So the three of us been friends for a while, and EFN started to have kids, and K and I had already had a couple. Oh, I had a couple of kids at the time, and K had one. And so EFN was starting to get into it and asking a whole bunch of questions, and we would always just trade information as we were going through our journeys. And it became something that happened so frequently that because he already started a podcast, he kind of was like, why don't we just turn a mic on and have the same conversation? And so now we're 7 years in, haven't skipped an episode. Where we just crossed 300 episodes.
Wow!
And it's
Congratulations.
Thank you. And a lot, like, I think George, you and I spoke about this a little bit in kind of the green room setting, but it really has endured the test of time because
Mhm.
it satisfies a selfish need. Honestly, it's therapy for us,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's a space where we get to hold each other accountable. We get to share our joys, our pain points, and really just like work with each other to try to elevate all of us. And our audience, for some reason or another, appreciates that.
Yeah. Well, it's brotherhood, quite simply, and that's yeah. Most men don't have that, unfortunately, and it's necessary. I actually, it was a recent guest talked about this, that he saw some study that in order to be like mentally healthy and capable as a modern man, you at a minimum need to have 2 days, 2 separate days a week where you have genuine like conversation and connection with other masculine friends.
Mm.
And if you don't have that, you're at risk, you're way increased risk of like anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies, all that stuff. So like, it's not really a selfish need. It's literally like built into us. It's a feature, not a flaw, and having that consistent connection is just such a beneficial tool to men that I think a lot of us don't really realize how important it is, and kind of, well, we can cave on that because I have other things I need to get to. It's like, well, you're doing that at the risk of your own health, quite literally. So
That and having sex often is very healthy for men too. Like, your
yeah,
prostate is going to
that's
suffer
usually
if you
pretty
don't.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I try to let all the women know, for the benefit of their spouses and or myself. so that we can make sure we keep that healthy and happy. But I mean that was semi-serious, a little bit joking, but the truth, but I didn't know about that study. But it's as you were saying that, I was thinking about, like, in any given week, I'll feel like this urge to connect with my buddies, right? And then I almost, there's a sense of guilt sometimes that I feel, and I'm trying to figure out, like, why does that happen? Like, why should I feel guilty? And it's not because my wife is like, no, you can't hang out with your buddies. Like, she's
Yeah. Like
never
dad
done that.
guilt. Like you're kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I,
But
I
now that
think
you said that, I don't think I'm gonna feel that guilt anymore because there's studies now.
I think a little bit of it is because so often men go to negative things to like escape from home, and it's not actually like with genuine, like what you guys are doing with your podcast, right? That's you guys are in the same season of life. You're genuinely peers. You push each other to be better. You're talking about real challenging issues, and the end result is you leave back to your family a more fulfilled man, ready to be a better leader and husband and father to your kids, right? Whereas if you were just going off to the bar and just slamming 30 beers a night, you're coming back as a very not good guy, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
think that's part of the guilt that a lot of men have today is it's not all the same, right? Not all outlets are productive, but there are very productive ones that you should invest in because it doesn't only help you, it does by extension help your family significantly because you're going to be calmer, more able to be stoic in like tense situations. You're not going to like blow your lid on your kids when they spill the cup or whatever because you're not stressed to the max, you know? And it's an important investment men need to start making in themselves because if you don't, your family suffers. So building some tight friendships where you can have those real conversations, even if it's just decompressing with what's going on in your life, that is certainly more productive than blowing your lid on your family, right? Letting your anger take
100%.
over. So I think
That's
Justin has something for you.
that's very mature emotional intelligence. Like,
Yeah.
just being aware of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I mean, I'm a 44-year-old man, so it's taken me a good 40 to start to awaken to the whole idea of having some sense of emotional intelligence. And now more than ever, it's paying dividends like crazy
Oh,
because
yeah.
even, with my children, like, I've noticed staunch difference, and
Yeah.
highly recommended if you're if you're not in that place, invest time in it because it's going to pay off big time.
We interrupt this episode to talk about Synthesis Tutor, the world's first superhuman math tutor. It is warm, patient, and understanding and adapts to your child so you never have to worry about them falling behind when it comes to math. In episode 84, we spoke to Chrisman Frank, the CEO of Synthesis, and immediately afterwards, I purchased Synthesis Tutor for my daughter, and it has been an absolute game changer for us. Math used to be a very painful experience. It was frustrating, and there was lots of tears for my daughter when it came to learning math. It's something she's not naturally good at, and we struggled a lot. Now she happily uses Synthesis Tutor every single week, and there's no more frustrating nights. The way it works is that it leverages AI to adapt the experience to your child to not simply master memorization of math facts, but it actually teaches the principles and concepts so that your child can independently solve problems without needing tons of outside help. Because it tailors the experience to your child, it is always adapting and learning where the child is in terms of their development, and it keeps them in the proximal zone of learning so that your child is being challenged but not getting frustrated or defeated by the experience. I am very pleased with our experience on Synthesis Tutor. My daughter's grades have improved in math. It's something that I can now outsource. I don't have to take the time myself to sit there and try and memorize facts with her. She gets excited to do it, and it's fun and engaging for her to learn instead of this frustrating experience, and it doesn't feel like a chore any longer. So we at the Present Fathers podcast highly endorse Synthesis Tutor. There is also a Teams function for those with multiple kids or maybe multiple families want to pool their children together. You can check that out on the website. You can get 10% off with your purchase by going to synthesis.com/PFP. That's synthesis.com/PFP. Go there, check it out, and start supercharging your child's learning experience with the power of AI. Back to the episode, because you can build real connection.
100%.
Go for it, Justin.
Yeah, so something we talk about a lot is, having your tribe, having your wolf pack, whatever you want to call it. But one thing we don't talk about, especially as men, and this is something I don't think we've even dove that deep into, is accountability. it's hard to hold others accountable with either A, them not getting offended, or B, you not finding something that you critique a little too hard, or, whatever the case may be. So, what advice would you have for anybody who's new to a tribe or new to a group to try to hold others accountable without, kind of ruffling feathers in the wrong way? And I get it. Sometimes people need their feathers ruffled, but, when you're making new connections, that's harder for guys. So, what advice would you give to some of those guys?
Yeah, I think it starts with establishing a sense of trust, right? Like there needs to be a unique, an understanding of who the unique people are in your tribe and what they're, and it takes a little bit of time. I don't, maybe a couple months, something like that, right? But like just to get a flow for who they are, how they act, and what their normal way of being is in that forum. And then I think it's really just asking permission to kind of kick things off, right? And then if you've enabled that trust in that group and you guys have struck a chord in a positive way and kind of have started to establish a rapport, being able to ask that permission and share something that's genuine in a respectful manner goes a very long way.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think asking questions of each other is probably one of the best things you could possibly do, because you can kind of fish around the truth a little bit and, at the end be like, "Hey, do you want my advice?" And if they say no, they just want you to listen, they may just listen. But if they say yeah, you can be brutally honest at that point because they asked for your advice. I feel like there's ways that you can kind of connect. I think that's such a good thing that you said, building the trust, because there's a reason I go to George. There's a reason, obviously, I know I can go to my twin brother because he's my twin, but like Dustin and George are brothers as well, because I know at the end of the day, I can give them my deepest, darkest secrets, let them see the darkness inside me, and they're like, whatever, dude, let that be light. And I think that's such a powerful thing, is just telling other guys that they need to, one, trust in each other, but two, holding each other accountable. It's not an easy thing, especially since society tries to hold us accountable for things that, they twist and turn, and it's hard. There's always some societal change or a want of men. They kind of hold us in a cage, so to speak, whether we're doing right or wrong. So I think it's good for you to be able to talk about that amongst your tribe, so that all those issues you've already resolved. So if someone brings it to you in a negative way, you can be like, no, that's not the case. You're confident in it.
And it's so you bring up a valid point, and also it's something that I use in my own parenting life, right? As far as like how I treat and teach my kids making mistakes, right? So like we I think it's probably human nature, not necessarily a man or a woman thing, but like we try to run from mistakes or mask the fact that we're making mistakes or never really want to talk about us making mistakes. And I mean, personally, I still haven't gotten away from that feeling of like, wanting to dodge it. But at the same time, it is the best teacher when you make mistakes and you learn from them. Almost nothing can teach you better than that. And being able to make mistakes in an environment that allows for you to do that and have it be a vehicle of growth is very powerful. Right. And so I've made the mistake many times, and I know many parents who have done the same, where your child makes a mistake and you ridicule them and you put them down and you make them feel like they just committed a sin. And in reality, it's your opportunity as a parent to teach or maybe reteach what it is, the lesson that you're trying to get them to understand. Same goes for when you're having conversations with a trusted group. You have to make it, or I recommend it's made a safe space for mistakes to be told and no judgment to be passed. Because I'm a part of a brotherhood, a fraternity that I got into when I was in college. We've got everything from convicted felons, people doing life, to doctors and prestigious people, and everyone is the same, right? We treat each other with the same kind of respect. You made different choices in life that landed you in different places. That doesn't take away from the good that you can still provide to the world, even if you are in a tiny cell doing a life bit.
Yeah. Well, let's dive a little deeper into that. So, going into that, applying to fatherhood, holding our children accountable is different than grown men, because, grown men typically have emotional maturity and the things that kids don't, know how to regulate yet. So what advice would you give to parents or fathers who are, struggling with a kid who's lashing out or a kid that just doesn't want to listen? I mean, you said you've seen it yourself through convicted felons versus, highly successful people. What's that commonality that they all kind of see?
It's kind of meeting them where they are. I think is the general lesson or the way I've been able to deal with it. And that sounds very easy, but it's very difficult because there's typically a lot of emotion involved in those encounters, those engagements. So
Well, it
if it's
requires
like,
humility, right? Because you have to inherently shelf your wants, needs, desires, or whatever for that situation in lieu of the other person.
yeah, and it's incredibly difficult. I've I've gotten a lot better, but I used to be a tyrant with my children. And for better or worse, I always call my eldest, because she was the first, my training wheels, right? Like I didn't know anything about anything until she came along. And unfortunately, I had to learn through my mistakes with her, and still made mistakes down the line, but the brunt of those mistakes she felt. And so I've had to atone for those mistakes many, many, many times. But I've learned that if I'm if I'm having a bad day, I know anything's going to set me off. So I start to coach myself away from allowing myself to be in a situation that's going to trigger me, even if it comes across as slightly rude. So, for example, my child, I know I'm going to blow my lid, right? And my one of my kids is like nagging me, Dad, come and play with me. Dad, come and play with me. And I'm ready to lose it. I'll say, I need to go outside for a minute. And I might have a tone in the way I say it, but I need to escape that situation with as little collateral damage as possible so that I can come back and address the thing in the proper, even if I have to say, I'm sorry that I left in that way. But I'd rather that than do something or say something I'm going to regret for many, many years. So
Yeah,
it's a lot of practice.
Yeah, and I think it boils all down to the dad, and how well they can model that behavior themselves. So, one of the things that I've realized dealing with my past traumas is that I'm not healing it to handle future trauma. I'm healing it to learn how to handle good emotions like joy and not feel guilty. And so my kids get to experience that without having to go through all that trauma. And so, like, it's fighting that battle that they don't have to fight. Right. And so, like, we are gaining an emotional intelligence being in brotherhoods and learning from other people's mistakes. So we're leveling up faster than we would if we had isolated and shoved it down. And then we're passing that to our kids gift wrapped, compared to what the world would do for them. The world would brutalize them into that position eventually if they didn't have a victimhood mentality, right? If they had a victor mentality. So, it's just all in all, the brotherhood, the emotional intelligence, all those things are so crucial, but they all start with the dad, and that's why it's so important. I think that's why we all work so hard to really reach out to the dad first, because the dad can set the example and set the bar.
And the dad oftentimes is the one that's lagging behind, unfortunately, behind the mom, right? The mom is by and large like up here, and we have to try to meet them kind of where they're at so we can be a true partner in this journey. Even if, I don't wish this on anyone, but even if you are co-parenting, right? There still needs to be that responsibility and that leveling up for both. And I always put the onus on the father, because I see it way too often where the dad is like absent or not present, and there's always some kind of strife that the mom is trying to drag the dad to be kind of a part of things, and it doesn't necessarily always add up.
Yeah, and it's even more difficult, in those early years too, when the kids are the youngest. Like one of the things my wife and I are struggling with right now is my son. He's almost 2.5. He's a big dude for two. And my daughter's 7.5 months old. She's a tiny little peanut, and she's sitting in her car seat the other day, and my son's like, making goo goo gaga faces at her, seems happy, and then he just reaches in there and starts clawing her freaking eyes, and I'm like, bruh, what are you doing? Like, first thing I did was spank his little butt, and I got upset at him, and I lost my temper a little bit, and I caught myself later. I was like, man, I felt so guilty about it. But after that, I made it a mission that, we had just spoken to another guest, Adam Allred, and I've spoken to him about some things and discipline and stuff. And he gave me some good advice to just research everything you do. And so that's what I was doing. My wife and I got on online and started researching how do you deal with a kid in a healthy way, but still, actively punish them. And so one of the things they said was, don't tell them what they did wrong, tell them what they could do right. So they have something to focus on that's positive. Stop telling them no, tell them a correction. And so we've been working on that, and he's been much better this week after that. So yeah, it's a struggle, man, because my wife, she's not a screamer, she's not a yeller, but she finds herself, raising her voice and her tone, and sometimes yelling at him. And I try to tell her, hey, simmer down. Same thing for me. She holds me accountable, but it's not easy, man. Especially when you got 202. That's a gauntlet, man. And you're both exhausted. You're both stressed out of your mind. And we as men, we carry so much stress anyways. Women are a good way of getting it out. They, gossip to each other, chat, whatever the case may be. But we internalize our problems, and then we're wearing so many hats. We don't really get to show that stress because it's not healthy for us to show our partners their stress because we are the leaders. We have to lead. So that's why, like George and some of our guests have said, like, it's such a huge thing to have a few nights a week, like where you just go and, like Adam Allred said, go have a campfire, or like George has said previously, like have a night where you just spend time with your guys, even if it's online, and just say, hey, like what's going on with you this week, so that you can vent, because the healthier you are, like Brandon said, the healthier your family is. So yeah, it's a struggle, man. So I get it.
I feel for you, man. The 202 thing is real. I've never had kids that close in age, so I'm always in awe. The fact that you have your hair well put together right now says a lot about you being able to handle stress. Because as you can see, I've let that go a long time ago.
It's thinning, bro. I'm about to have to do something.
That's funny. Manny, earlier you had mentioned, you had grown in your emotional intelligence. What were some of those things that you learned? What were some of the things that you did to actually do that? Because I think that word gets thrown around a lot, emotional intelligence. And I think a lot of guys are like, okay, how do I get that? How do I attain that thing? Right? Teach me what you know. So what are some of the ways that it worked for you?
Yeah. So I kind of started. So I'll take it through like the phases of it, right? So I'd say roughly when I became 40 is when I'll say I had like the awakening, and that was 4 years ago at this point. And so it just became like something that I became more aware of, and I was able to call out. I was able to look at myself honestly and say, you're acting like a little baby right now, and not like you're a punk, but more just like you really could have handled that differently, and you allowed yourself to get to a place that you don't want to be in. So that was kind of how it started, and then I started to pick at those mistakes I kept making, and started to rectify some of them that I knew were really affecting my family life. At the time, I noticed that there was a huge influence from the job that I held, the company that I worked for. The pressures of that job very easily translated into chaos in my house. And I was able to understand that really quickly, and I quit the job. I didn't have a backup plan. I just said, this is not worth I'm not sacrificing my life because of my own like stress levels and that, but my family life is not worth this job. So I hung it up, and
Can I just
figured
interject real
out
quick
other
on that?
ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's leadership. Like we talk about a lot, like men need to lead. That's some of the, like the hard decisions that have to be made, right? Is, hey, this is not good for my family. This kind of stuff is eating us up. And if you don't do what Manny did, and you just keep kind of like, well, we'll just white knuckle through it, and it'll work out one day. No, it won't. It's not just going to magically get better. You have to change the situation. So I just want to like really call that out and commend you, man, because that's like the tough leadership when it's hard to be a leader. It's really easy to be a leader when everything's going right, but like that's a tough decision, and clearly has benefited your family, I assume. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of call that out because that is a great example of doing the hard right versus the easy wrong.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and it was easier to do with such a supportive and faithful wife. Like she has like amazing faith in me and my abilities, and you know, for us
Love
together to
that.
get to wherever we want to go. So that helped a ton.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
But then more recently, it's a year and a half ago, I attended this retreat, and it was really like, if I had to describe it, it was just a feel your feelings retreat, right? Like, get to understand how to feel as a man. And it was put on by a gentleman by the name of Andrew Horn, who does this. These retreats are called Junto, and it was a remarkable experience. It was a weekend. It was no phones. It was just like one of those, like, just be with a bunch of dudes, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I really learned that it was okay. Which is so, the older I get, the more I realize that asking permission is something that I need. Whereas, like, it still doesn't make sense to me. But like, getting permission to do things like feel your feelings and feel them fully, and then just like really understand what that feeling is, and then let it go. And just that process has taught me a ton, right? And now I try to practice that every day, and really just allow for the feelings without reacting, but just really just internal, not internalizing, like digging it down and kind of tampering it down, but understanding that feeling, those emotions, allowing yourself to go through those emotions, and then that satisfies kind of the urge or the need that is kind of bringing those emotions about.
Yeah. I'd argue that's true stoicism, right? Stoicism isn't the absence of emotion. It's you recognize them, you identify it, kind of assess the situation, and it's choosing to not let that emotion, because they can be good ones or bad ones, right? It's not just anger, for example.
Right.
It could be
Right.
deep sorrow. It could be a very sad moment or something. And stoicism isn't completely shutting down like a robot. It's understanding, okay, this is a moment of deep sorrow. I'm going to modulate and regulate that emotion to where I'm still in control of this situation. I'm still making a wise decision, but I'm still going to feel the thing. I'm just not going to let it completely overtake all of my brain function. Right. And, so let's use the sorrow one, because I think most people think emotional regulation, they think anger or something like that. Right. If we're disconnected from our emotion, like let's say family dog dies, right? That's a sad event. Kids take that really hard. It's probably the first, generally for the average, family out there, a pet dying is usually the first loss of life that a kid will experience, on average, I think. But, um, if you're totally shut off as the dad and like, well, it's just a pet or something like that,
Yeah.
you're totally missing the opportunity. You're totally missing the chance to teach your kids how to navigate this sorrowful thing. It's sad, and to work them through the grief of it, connect with them, like you said, right? You got to meet them where they're at. That would still be stoic, right? You're not going to completely turn to a pile of pudding because the dog died, but you're not going to totally shut down either. And so what you were talking about there, I've had a very similar journey myself where, I realize, I'm the only man in the house. I have a wife and a daughter. I've had to get pretty good at modulating my emotions and meeting them where they're at, because theirs are much more intense than mine usually. And what I found is I can play this kind of balancing role for them to bring down the intensity of them, but not negate them, not negate the emotions completely, and kind of act as a guide through them. And then collectively, we get stronger together because we're building deep connection through those experiences. And so it sounds like that's a lot of what you were talking about. And so I just wanted to walk through that for the men listening, because I think that word stoicism is very misunderstood. And real emotional regulation isn't just shutting it all down.
Oh.
It's controlling them in a healthy manner. And so if you're completely stuck and lost on where to get going with that, I recommend doing some personal reading on probably some resources to learn a little bit. But I guess at that point, what would you recommend, other than maybe like the retreat that you experienced? What's a other kind of self-study method men could go to?
Man, I'll tell you. So taking walks and just you being alone and having the opportunity to just let your mind wander is the biggest gift I've gotten from the craziness that is the pandemic. Because I was able to really connect with myself in a way that I have never before, and not anything that I had to work hard at. Right? It was just like I intentionally left my AirPods at home, kept my phone like notifications off, and just like allowed myself to walk for a period of time. Especially on the nice days. Oh my god, like the dopamine hit is crazy.
Yeah.
So that I think is kind of like an easy way for you to like really just lock in to who you are, and you just start to feel stuff, and then it allows you to kind of think through it a little bit and feel it. And then sometimes you get eureka moments and you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this other thing now because that thing didn't feel good.
Yeah. It's like shower thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just about
That's
to
another
say,
Yeah.
place.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
guys talk about meditation, and discipline, and meditation is one of the things that helps them stay in a focused mindset. But what people don't realize is meditation can be self-reflection as well. It can be taking a quiet walk where you're just lost in your thoughts and not really paying attention to what's around you, or actually getting lost in nature so that you can kind of shut your brain down if you're the opposite. So people just need to realize self-reflection is such a beautiful thing, and we don't get a lot of it as fathers, for sure. And my favorite is, the headsets that are noise canceling. Just get in the gym and get after it. Ain't nothing better feeling than that. Get an hour to yourself, just pump some iron. You're like, oh, you feel alive. You know what I mean? So that'd be my advice
That's
personally.
that's another thing actually. I didn't take working out seriously until I was like 40. 40, there was a lot of firsts in 40.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of kicked things off. And funny enough, I started a business in the pandemic. I turned 40 at the same time. I started working out in earnest at that point too. And it all kind of happened virtually, right? Because even working out, I had a trainer. We would zoom in and do all that. But being able to have like sacred time to really just lock in and work on your health and wellness and all that kind of stuff is there's no I don't know of a better way for you as a man or you as a person to really get yourself as well oiled as you can to tackle whatever's in front of you. Those things are gold.
Yeah. And just that was through fitness, you said is the best way to
Kind of the
start that?
combination of things, but like fitness, and like I said, like those reflection walks that
Okay.
I would go on. Those two in particular
Yeah.
were
In
pretty
tandem. Yeah.
substantial.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Like, and I coach men that fitness isn't everything, but it's not nothing either. It's not just about the way you look. It's one of the first easiest ways to give yourself tangible feedback about your discipline paying off. I mean, it literally
That's
trains
a good
you in the
point.
habit of, okay, it's a little thing. I'm going to just do it. I commit to it and trust the process because nothing happens fast with that. It takes time and dedication and commitment, a little bit of sacrifice. But when we start to get in those habits, whether it's emotional regulation, training your body, like disconnecting and healing your mind through just some quiet time and things like that, these are all daily disciplines that really help tune out all the noise and stress and drama and all that kind of stuff, and it puts you in a much better place. And we're talking about being a better man for your family. Well, you have to put some you time in because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so it's not selfishness. Good leaders make sure that they are prepared themselves. Like think of a business or a sports team, right? The captain of the team can't be the worst dude on the field. He obviously has to put preparation in to be prepared and be one of the best players and all that kind of stuff, right? So in the same way, we got to do that for ourselves as husbands and fathers, or we're showing up with, half the ability, right? You're totally depleted. You're just kind of there. But yeah, I love your recommendations, man, because they're simple and effective, and they're some of the best places to start if you're feeling kind of like you're stuck in a rut or whatever.
Something else. So, like I mentioned, FlyDads kind of started as a confidence boosting company, right? And I always use, I mean, no longer, but when I used to go to the barber to get a haircut, there was nothing better than the feeling of that fresh cut, right? After the barber comes and does his thing, and then you get out of that chair, you're Superman as soon as you get out of that chair, right? And so that's the emotion or the feeling that we try to give fathers that buy or interact with the brand. And it's such a fundamental thing, but in every facet of our lives as men, when we're able to be at our highest level of confidence, we overperform, right? And I'd say that's probably true for humans, but my experience with guys and just the competitive nature of most men and kind of the way we are, if we are high confidence, we're gonna parent the crap out of the situation. We're going to be the best husband. Everything's going to be at 10. And so I always look for every opportunity to help other dads in that regard. And sometimes it's as simple as, like we were talking about the tribe, right? Like having a conversation about, hey, I saw you did this. Do you mind if I talk to you a little bit about what I saw and what I think you might want to consider? Or, man, you did a hell of a job. Because we don't oftentimes we don't even give ourselves props. We just kind of like, oh yeah, that was expected, whatever. Like you're supposed to do that. No, like it's sometimes it's really difficult to do that. And when you get to do it, like it's nice to get a pat on the back. So I always look for those opportunities because
Yeah.
we always need it.
It feels good to feel good, man.
100%.
Well, it's also so vital to be able to identify the mistakes, right? Having the wisdom and the experience to identify. So, I guess my question to you is what's one of the biggest mistakes that you've seen men and dads doing today, and how did you learn to identify those kind of things?
I think it goes back to just the ability to have the presence of mind to act or sorry, to control your emotions, not act on your emotions. Whether it's the high highs or the low lows, right? Because either can be detrimental. So I think for I'll give you an example, right? I'm a sports dad. My kids play basketball, and I'm oftentimes in an environment where I see parents over cheering when their kid is doing marginal, not even like out of control great, right? They're just kind of there. They're going hyper, happy for the situation. And I see the false confidence that provides for the child, but also what that does to other parents in the room on the opposite team, right? And how that creates this imbalance in the gym that makes it really like tense unnecessarily. And the same is said on the other side, right? Like everything that's happening bad is like everybody else's fault. It's like all this beef and all this like really bad behavior from the parents. And so I always look at that and I'm like, you guys are setting the wrong example. You're not allowing your kids to develop in a way that the game is trying to help them get to, right? Like if you're putting them in a sport, you should allow the sport to kind of do what it's supposed to do, right? You can't be in the way trying to negotiate a certain outcome or have your kid participate in a particular way that maybe they're not ready for.
Right.
And so it's something I hate because I get emotional about watching my kids play, but I'm never like, well, sometimes I do get on their case, but they know it's fair. It's not me just being
Yeah.
an outlandish father. But I don't push against like the refs or other like getting bickering with other parents. I'm like, it's not necessary, and I see that happen way too often. And I'm just like, the hurt that you're pushing on your kids in those circumstances is just too great, and people don't get it until further down. Like
Right.
they lose the love of the game, or they have these traumas that they're working through for the rest of their lives because of those instances.
Yeah, like the over cheering, even, if they're not doing that great. Yeah, I mean, your kid knows. They see how the other kids are playing too. They're not idiots, even from a very young age, 6, 5, they can kind of tell if they're not doing as well. And then they know you're lying, you know? So it may seem it's niceness, but it's not actually kindness, right? And then on the other end, right, being super intense about it and you mess this up and you mess that up, it's all negative, then same thing. You're just destroying what confidence they do have. And there's a way to really what it requires us as the adults is to recognize that for 99.9% of the kids playing the game, they're not going to do it professionally.
Yeah.
They're not
So
going
let
to
them
get that
enjoy.
scholarship to college or whatever. It's
Right.
a
So let
great
them.
learning tool to learn some amazing life lessons. And should they try hard and play to win? Of course, it feels great to win. The taste of victory is a beautiful thing, but it's also just as important for them to learn the sting of defeat because it's a
Failure is an
controlled
asset.
environment, right? It's just a game. Life will continue, but it prepares you for those. You have the opportunity as the parent to set these conditions to train these life lessons through sports, through acting, music, whatever the event is that you strive very hard towards to do well. And if you're too intense about it or over cheering and all that kind of stuff, you'd never give them that lesson. You never give them the experience that they really needed. And honestly, it's just a projection. You're just showing your character, your lack of growth yourself. And I'm with you completely. It's just a very visceral example of the parents that aren't getting the point, that they're not putting in the work themselves. They're trying to live vicariously through their kids' success as opposed to teach and train. And I don't really know how we wake enough dads up to that. I hate to see that it's a common trope, right? The over intense dad about the sports ball, which I love, athletics, but we need some perspective here, guys.
Well,
it's a
sorry.
Justin just said
balance.
Go.
Yeah, I was gonna say Justin just said it. Like, it's a huge asset to be able to like let them experience those things.
So that's what I was going to add. Was George had a very good point. They live vicariously through their kids, and what they don't realize is they also live through their kids' failures. And if they haven't dealt with their traumas, it bothers them, and to a point where they're not a good parent to their kid. And I think a lot of people that just go straight over their head, they don't realize that's what's going on. And you also have to remember, like, if you teach your kids to fail as often as possible, they'll be the most resilient. That's how you make a 1% everyday kid. That's how you make a professional player or get them to exceed all expectations in anything in life, is show them, hey, I purposely put you in a position to fail. And I did it on purpose because you need to feel comfortable with this. You need to feel comfortable with failing because it's going to happen a lot in this world, And a lot of parents are afraid to have that tough conversation. And I think as a father, that's our role, is to say, hey, I want you to fail as early and as often as possible because it's better for you to fail now than later in life when it really matters. You know what I mean? And I think, like we were saying, it's an asset. 100%. You can teach your kids to fail so that they learn to win. And then it just eats them alive that they're like, oh, well, actually, I'm starting to win. Oh, this feels really good. You've already built the resilience. Now they're just like, let's go, man. And then you've got little Michael Jordan over there in the corner doing his thing, so, or Kobe, whoever you like. I don't know. Just as long as it's not LeBron.
I'm with you.
Well, I think it's also a key point of just figuring out balance, like not being an extremist on one side or the other, right? And learning to find that balance, that harmony in anything, right? And so, like for dads, like I have struggles sometimes when I'm passionate, I want to be a little bit extreme, but I have to rein it in. And so you were asking how can, a dad help get better at that? Well, it's really simple. You don't put out the first thought in your head. Like until you're an emotionally regulated, very highly intelligent, emotional person,
Filters.
don't ever put out the first thought. Give it a couple tests. Give it a couple other thoughts.
Yeah.
See what else comes out. Then you put out what you want.
It's really that simple.
Right. And
but
sometimes
it's hard.
It is hard. But sometimes that third or fourth or fifth thought is the one that the kid needs to hear, flat out. So
I couldn't agree more. And I have an example from yesterday. As a matter of fact, my daughter was my oldest. She was saying something. She's like saying some things, like showing like doubt about something that she was like about to embark on. And actually, it was somebody had reached out about her potentially auditioning for a commercial, a TV commercial, and it was for Adidas. And she was finding every excuse in the book as to why she didn't want to audition. And the audition wasn't anything crazy. It was like, because she plays basketball, so they're looking for like an athlete, a basketball player. So she had to kind of answer some questions and show some of her skills, right? And I was going to record it. And she found every excuse in the book. Oh, I'm not an Adidas girl. I'm a Nike girl. I'm not going to do that. I was like, it took everything inside of me not to like berate her. So I was like, these are the most ridiculous. Just say you're scared. Say you're scared. Tell me like something that makes more sense. And so to your point, Brandon, I had to bite my tongue quite a bit. I did say some outlandish things, but they were a lot better than the things that I was going to originally say. And my intention wasn't to like coerce her into doing it. It was more just like bringing to light, hey,
Right.
these are opportunities that not very many people get. This is a fun
Right.
thing. This is not like a math test, right?
Yeah.
Like these are like cool opportunities that
Right.
could translate into other things. And if you don't like where it's going, you can say no. Like it's up to you. And so she finally we were able to record it, but even through that process, I was able to show her at the end of it, like your performance was kind of whack. And you know why it was kind of whack? Because the way you approached this thing was from a negative place. And her brother, I said, he's 10, he's 11 now. I was like, hey, why do you want to do this? Because I'll submit yours too, even though they're not asking for you. He's like, yeah, yeah. His demeanor was completely different. He went out there and like did his thing. And it was like a easy contrast for me to like show, like, not like your brother's better than you. It wasn't the intention, but it was like you were very negative about this experience. You had every excuse in the book as to why you shouldn't do it. You did it, but you could have, you could have done better. And then my son, she was the one that commented. She was like, "You did a really good job." And I was like, so like to your point, Brandon, like I was gonna go bonkers on her. And I was like, you know what? No, because I don't want to destroy this kid. I just want to show her she's missing the point in taking advantage of an opportunity.
You're fostering her inner light, and you're not diminishing it, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the things that dads have to be careful of is to foster that inner child, and that could come out through patience. Can certainly come through goofiness, lightheartedness, those kind of things. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Right. And that example is a good one too, because it's sometimes it's our job to push a little, right? Push them outside their comfort zone a little bit, and it's not letting fear limit our kids from achieving what they want to or could do, and that kind of thing. So it's a balance. To Brandon's point, can't be a tyrant about it, but there is a little bit of a gentle push that we need to consistently give them. Right? They gotta leave the nest at some point. So
And those moments when you do push, and on the other side of that, the result is very clear to them that, man, if I hadn't done this, it would have been X, but I'm glad I did it because Y happened. And it's very clear to them. Those moments are like core memories. And it's amazing how much confidence they generate from those opportunities that they didn't think they could even like stumble into.
It's our job to draw out. That's what we do. We draw it out of them, and that's exactly how. And then so when they achieve it, then right, tons of pour on the praise, build them up, because it just keeps that positive cycle going. So
yeah, and then they listen to you more.
Right,
It's this amazing thing.
You build trust. All right, so Manny, we're gonna transition to a kind of a line of questioning on fatherhood specific stuff, kind of lofty philosophical type of things here. So let's kick off with the first one: is what does legacy mean to you, and what is the legacy that you want to leave?
Damn, you got to go that hard, that fast?
We're going hard in the paint.
Legacy. So I don't know if I've ever defined it for myself. I think about it in the sense that when you look back, or when your kids look back, I usually look at it from like a grandchild's perspective, but like, when my grandkid and I'm no longer around, they are able to very easily see like the steps that I took to get to a certain place in life, and what impact I've had on the world, when I was around, right? Not so much like how much money I made, or more about like simply how many people I've been able to help.
Yeah.
And in what way, right? And that's very clear. So I always talk about how fathers is my passion, right? Helping fathers in whatever way I can. And so my kids see that now and see how much passion I put behind that. And so that's kind of the way I think about it. Sorry, there was a second part to that legacy question.
It's ultimately what is the legacy you want to leave?
Oh, so it is centered around fatherhood. I have this dream where I'm able to impact, because I came from the inner city and I saw the disproportionate impact of not having fathers around. Um, I I've always had this dream of being able to help those children. So I look at it starting from like high school to develop high school athletes in particular. So basketball players is kind of the concentration, and help steer them in a direction, kind of as a complement to their high school careers, both academic and athletic. um, Giving them emotional intelligence help from the very early stage, financial literacy and kind of intelligence around how to think about money, how to leverage it, and that kind of thing. And then what kind of the third is more like an accountability aspect of it.
Right.
And so developing kind of like a curriculum almost that is bolted onto their normal study that carries on with them, because a lot of these kids, particularly like the basketball players, like I said, they're like the man or the woman in their area, right? So they're like the standout. They go to college, they tend to be really good as well. So they're always on the top of the world. Then when their career ends, they go crashing down. Their ego goes to crap, their confidence is on the floor, and they fumble for a long time, these folks. And that contributes pretty severely to the family dynamic in a very bad way. So I use that as kind of an example of the legacy I want to leave behind personally, where I'm instituting these developmental programs that help to usher in stronger men, by and large, to be strong, stable father figures,
Yeah.
to be able to then prop up society in those microcosms that they live in.
I love that, man. Uh, that's definitely a legacy worth fighting for.
Amen. So, Manny, I want you to picture pre-dad Manny, okay? And imagine the struggling and all the things, the hardships, right? Right as you became a father. What was one piece of advice that you wish you would have given younger Manny?
Ooh, I don't. So I would. I'm going to say this is very simple, but I don't even know how I would have given Manny a tangible example of how to do this. And it's learn patience. Like I was very impatient. I was an emotional wreck most of the time. And I think it had a lot to do with just the anxiety, obviously, of this new thing. But so I'll give you a little bit of backstory actually, because it kind of my experience is compounded a little bit. So my eldest is actually my stepdaughter. And so I, while she's not my biological child, I got into the picture when she was 4. And so I was dealing with her and understanding our dynamic and developing a rapport for a couple of years. And then my son comes along. And so I'm like, not battling, but like learning how to be a father to a child that I kind of just crashed into almost. And then my son now starts to come about. And so my patience was very thin. I wasn't mentally like uh I wouldn't say prepared. I was definitely prepared. I just was all over the place. So being able to have patience was going to be kind of like would have been the antidote, I think.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful advice.
So, quick follow up. There's a lot of step parents out there. There's a lot of stepdads. Given your experience, what are some of the things that you've learned in that journey that you think would be helpful for kind of guys stepping into that role, just getting started, or very early on in becoming a stepfather? What are some things that have worked very well for you? Because blending families is a challenging thing. It doesn't happen overnight. And
Yeah.
that's probably much needed advice.
I'd say the first thing the first thing I thought about, like intentionally, I was not in competition with her father. So I made it a point to make sure that she knew she should foster a relationship with her dad, her biological father. I would support her in all of that, and I didn't want it to be a rivalry in any way. Unfortunately, he never stood up and kind of really bonded with her the way I think he should have. But so she doesn't look at anybody else as a dad, me, right? But I would say that's first, because if you enter that relationship as it being a rivalry, you're gonna do that child a big
Yeah.
disservice, and now it becomes about you and that other
Right.
person versus that child.
That is such wise advice, man. I love that.
So
Sorry to
I
me.
say that's the first thing, and then and sorry, the second thing is really doing a good job in um, building a relationship with that child the way they need it to be built. And so there's a little bit of give and take there. So I'll give you an example. In my world, when I was introduced to her, and my wife and I started getting serious, and it was okay for me to now come around because it was a serious relationship. Um, I felt a little disrespected by my stepdaughter at the time, because she was accustomed to kind of like being wild, and she didn't have a guy around, so she kind of treated me almost like a playmate, right? So every so often, like, she'd smack me, and I was like, I'm not with this. I'm like, normally if I get smacked, I'm smacking you back, but I was like, I can't do that. So it took a little bit of learning, but I had to understand, like, she's not disrespecting you. She's not used to you. So she's playing with you, but you don't take it as playing. So you have to come to an understanding of what playing looks like and help her understand it from your perspective without jeopardizing her fun. Right. And so that took a lot out of me to learn, because my ego got in the way a lot.
Mm,
And so I had to like really learn to put that down. And I'm grateful that my wife allowed us the opportunity to work through that and not kind of step in the way and feel like she had to play defense on both sides.
right. That's really good advice, man. And it's certainly a challenging thing, but you kind of volunteered for it, right? Like if you're if you're going to become a step parent, you obviously made that choice. So
Yeah.
it's going to be hard, but you need to take that responsibility seriously. And again, it comes back to meeting them where they're at, right? It's some humility, it's empathy, it's all these kind of things that we typically don't associate with masculinity, but in reality, they're the most masculine things we can provide in those situations. And it makes such a huge impact, because obviously, right? Like, fast forward to today, you guys have a very strong relationship. It sounds like you're very involved in her life. You've through your work and effort have restored a figure she needed in her life, and have given her a lot of preparation for real life when it's going to get hard, that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's all worth it.
It is. It's a beautiful thing on the other side, but when you're going through it, like everything else, it's challenging, but you gotta go through it.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things we ask every dad is just what is a core memory that pops in your head since you've been a father that you're never going to forget to the day you die, or a story, whatever comes in your head.
Cutting my son's umbilical cord, and how challenging. I thought that was going to be the easiest thing in the world. And in that moment, after seeing him come out, which I was a nervous wreck, because the umbilical cord was around his neck as he was coming out. So he was like a bit of a shade of purple. So getting him unwrapped of the umbilical cord, then seeing his oddly shaped head, because when you're pulling the kid out of the birth canal, things get a little deformed at first. Yeah, got the cone head
Got
action.
that cone head, yeah.
Yep.
And then so I'm going through that. He's delivered. I'm like tearing up, holding it back. And then they're like, okay, do you want to cut the umbilical cord? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I'm there, they give me the scissors, and I'm just like, and I'm like, why is this not cutting? And I'm like, this is so thick. And then logic starts to sink in, and I'm like, yeah, dumbass. This is like the like the only way this kid is getting
Yeah, the
nurtured.
lifeline.
The lifeline. So it's gotta be very well, protected. So it took me like, I don't know, 4 or 5 like attempts to like cut through the thing.
That's
So
funny.
that was wild.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've cut both of my kids' cords, and it is very thick. It's like cutting through a very, very thick rope. Like it's
Yeah.
tough. Yeah, for sure.
I didn't get to do either, which is crazy because both my wife and I are in medicine, and we both have been in ORs most of our life. And my wife had an emergency C-section for our son, and same thing. It was a scary situation. I almost didn't get to be in the OR for it. Like it was a big deal.
Wow.
But my daughter, thankfully, was like very chill, very planned. Wasn't like emergency by any means. But both times the surgeons just were chatting with us so much they forgot to like let me cut it. I was like, really? Like that's like a rite of passage, man. I missed it. Like,
Yeah, I didn't get to do it either.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
there we go. That's
You'll get your shot.
We'll see.
You really push
Now you got to make it a point. You got to write that down.
Oh, I'm
somewhere.
gonna be like, Doc, this is something that's happening. Get ready.
Wear a shirt that says like I'm cutting this. Yeah.
Where's the scissors?
Oh man, I love it. It's funny too, because like just in the emotion of the moment, you're just so caught up in it. No, you're not even thinking about what you're doing. It's pretty funny.
Not
Love
at all.
it,
It's
man.
scary and also hilarious at
Yeah.
the same time.
It's a great story now. It's pretty funny now. Manny, where is the best place for people to follow you, and how can we support you moving forward?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the best way. I'm at Manny Digital. That's 2 N's in Manny. And I mean, supporting me really is doing what you guys are doing, man. Like supporting me is supporting us, is supporting them. You know what I mean? So like, I look at things like opportunities like this as like great experiences, right? Because meeting fathers from all walks of life contributes to, again, kind of selfishly, to my own learning, understanding different cultures, different ways of parenting, different stages of parenting, and just building those bonds are like probably one of the more important things that I like to do, because again, the ability for us as men, as fathers, to connect and share and like really just kind of live with each other a little bit, even if it's virtual, is so impactful, and it benefits every one of our family lives, even in the most remote ways. So I think just being able to do more of these kinds of things, you know, with the guests you guys have and just pushing them out, I think it's all I need, really.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we love what we do because we know it's about a lot more than just us. But yeah, I want to just make one final point about, selfishly, it does benefit you, right? When you surround yourself with other people that have differing experiences and a lot of lessons learned from their journey, it pours into you, right? Like I have grown so much from hosting this podcast, getting to listen to guys like you and learning from, almost 100 at this point, experts. I have taken so much out of this selfishly, right? And applied it in my life. And we can all replicate that. You don't have to host a podcast, man. You just need to surround yourself with other guys trying to be a little bit better. You're going to learn things. It's inevitable. It's part of brotherhood and surrounding yourself with other guys that are, pursuing a mission. And it's so rewarding too, because you see it and you have those aha moments and you realize how to fix real problems in your life and in your kids' lives and that kind of stuff. And it's a rewarding experience that we all should be working hard towards. So I appreciate you sharing that, man.
100%. And I'll just share one quick thing, just like a tangible example of what you just said. So when we do the Fatherhoods podcast, we had a guest one time, and I had asked him, like, how do you ensure that you are communicating effectively with your toddler? And it was such a simple thing. He was like, I make sure I get down to their level and I speak to them in a calm tone. And I've done that with she's now 8, but since she's been like 4 years old, I took that advice and kind of ran with it. And it has dramatically changed our dynamic, because it was always kind of she was kind of afraid. And it wasn't because my tone was crazy or anything. It was just more the height differential, I think, was really the biggest, factor. And when I was able to come down to her level and just casually talk and just like ask basic questions like, why are you crying? What's going on? In a tone like that she was able to deal with, it dramatically changes things. So yeah, like the learning that happens from conversations with other guys, other dads, can't take it for granted. Like it's really impactful.
That's beautiful to hear, man. I'm glad that you're able to take it and apply it. Just amazing stuff. All right. Well, to our listeners, follow Manny at Manny Digital on Instagram. You can check out the Fatherhoods podcast. And if you're needing a really sweet, manly baby bag, right? Fly Dad Gear. And Manny,
FlyDadGear.com.
yeah, FlyDadGear.com. Manny, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your story and your perspectives. It has been a real treat. And to all the dads out there, enough talk. Let's get climbing. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.